And so we have 6 or 7 panelists. I can't remember the exact number. And Connor, who is one of our peer advisors, is going to moderate the session with all of our panelists. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Connor.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Megan. So I'm starting out with the first question, just kind of introduction for everyone. So we'll start with Shawnee. So just please state your name, major, future health profession, and the professional school that you'll be attending.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shawnee Alvarez. I was a kinesiology major that graduated winter 2020, and I will be attending Columbia University School of Nursing.
Okay, and then we'll move to Mandy.
Hi, I'm Mandy. I graduated Cal Poly in 2019. I was a biology major that concentrated in anatomy and physiology. And in July, I will be going to California Health Sciences University, which is one of the 3 DO schools in California.
Thank you. And Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan Menard. I graduated in 2018 as a bio major, and I'm going to be going to medical school at SUNY Downstate, which is State University of New York in Brooklyn.
Awesome. And Kayla?
Hi, my name's Kayla. I graduated Cal Poly as a bio major with a Spanish minor, I guess winter 2021, so this past March. And then I'm going to be attending dental school in July at University of Pacific, Dagoni School of Dentistry.
Okay. And Arisa?
Hi, my name's Arisa. I graduated 2019, bio major, and right now I'm in PA school at Cornell.
Awesome, thank you. And Jacqueline?
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Charbonneau. I am a bio major. I'll be graduating this June, and in August, I'm going to be starting optometry school at the Southern California College of Optometry, which is at Marshall B. Ketchum University.
All right, so next question is going to be, please describe how and when you came to the decision to pursue this health profession, and some kind of follow-up. So who or what inspired you? How did you investigate or confirm that this career was a good choice? And how did you explore your interests during your career? And I'm happy to repeat any of those if we need to. We'll start with Jacqueline.
So for me, optometry is a little bit more like of a specific career, I guess, than like medicine where you specialize like after you're in school already. So I think my biggest inspiration was honestly my own optometrist. I always just thought she was really cool, and like what she did was like just really exciting. Like every time I went there, I spoke to her so much and like had more of a connection with her than a lot of my other healthcare providers. So that's just kind of what inspired me, because I wanted to have that same relationship with my patients. So investigating it, I think shadowing was kind of my biggest thing, like just getting to see the profession in like its daily course, you know, like the goods, the bads, everything. And I definitely recommend everyone to shadow, even if it's something where it's like, okay, this is terrible, I hate this, like you still are going to learn a lot from it and be able to confirm like what you do want to do going off of that. And that's pretty much how I explored my interest, was mostly through that. Also just kind of doing independent research, like anything you can find. There's a lot of resources out there, people who have like different accounts about their own journeys or videos online. So that's kind of how I went through it.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And we'll go to Megan.
So basically like what Jacqueline said, lots of shadowing. I didn't have like one particular thing that was like, oh, this is why I want to go to medical school. It was more of like a combination of lots of different things, exploring different things. Because I went into Cal Poly as an earth science major and had like no clue what I wanted to do. So just getting out there and like taking on different experiences, I guess, and finding what you like along the way.
Okay, great. And we'll go to Arisa.
Yeah, I would just say I tried a bunch of different things before I decided to do PA. I did research for a while. I worked in software sales. I worked for a venture capital firm. Like, try whatever you think might be interesting. And kind of like what was mentioned earlier, if it means that you definitely don't want to do something, it still narrows something down. So I ended up picking PA because it just gives you a lot of options in terms of specialty, and because I still don't know what I want to specialize in, I like that as a PA you can move between specialties. So that was one of the biggest things that made me decide.
Okay, thanks, Arisa. And we'll go to Mandy.
Yeah, so kind of like everyone else, it really is trying a bunch of different things and seeing what you like. My first real shadowing experience, I got to go do an abroad shadowing experience for a summer, which was really cool. And I got to do a bunch of different specialties there, all inpatient specialties. And then when I came back from Cal Poly, I shadowed like a primary care pediatrician, and I realized I kind of liked the primary care side more. And then when I graduated Cal Poly, since I graduated, I've been working as a family medicine scribe. So kind of really building a foundation and kind of deciding what I do enjoy the more primary care preventive medicine side, which also helped me decide to apply to a lot of DO schools as well, because they tend to have a mission that revolves around that. So again, it's just trying to look at and research as many specialties and areas of medicine that you can and see what stands out to you.
Okay, and Shawnee.
Yeah, so basically like picking back off of everybody else, like obviously the shadowing opportunities were really one of the main things that kind of inspired me. I actually had entered the kinesiology major wanting to be a physical therapist, and then having that like shadowing opportunity, particularly really early on, which I think is also really important too, like to just seek them out as they become available to you, helped me realize that that's what I didn't want to do. And then, as it got more, as the time went on, I sought opportunities that were specific to nursing. And that's where I felt like that's why it was the best fit for me. And then also like as a kinesiology major, like the curriculum itself, like really, it revolves around the social determinants of health and the way we can improve health in really like critical and innovative ways. And I felt like the nursing philosophy really embodies that. So everything seemed to like make sense.
Okay, great, thank you. And Kayla?
So my aunt's a dentist, so I've kind of grown up around dentistry, I guess, and I always loved going to the dentist when I was younger. And then I just really like the atmosphere of dentistry where you can connect with your patients. So with my aunt, when I would stay there at her house for the summer, we would go out and she'd see all her patients. And it wasn't like professional setting or anything. Like she knew them by name out in public. Like she didn't have to look at their chart or anything. And they could carry a conversation that they like started when they were in the patient chair. So I just really like that type of relationship that I guess dentists have with their patients. Whereas I've noticed like if I saw my medical physician, I wouldn't feel that comfortable doing that. But it all depends on who you have. But I investigated by shadowing at first, but then I also got a job in that same office. And shadowing was honestly kind of boring, but because you're just standing for dentistry, and just watching, but if you think that if you put yourself in the shoes of the dentist, like actually doing it and think to yourself if you'll like it, then that's how I decided I would actually enjoy doing this procedure or something. And then I'm working as a dental assistant right now. So I really I don't know, it kind of confirms that I chose the right profession, I guess. So yeah.
Great. I think I got to everyone with that question. So we'll move on to the next one. So how did you manage your time to complete coursework and extracurriculars, and what are your best study tips? So we'll start with Mandy.
Yeah, so I decided I took a gap year before I applied to medical school. So since graduating Cal Poly and when I'll start, it'll be 2 gap years. And I think that extra time allowed me to have time to gain a lot more clinical experience. I've been working as a scribe since then, so I've gotten thousands of more hours on top of that. And it also gave me a little extra time to study for my MCAT as well. So that's something I enjoy doing and I recommend doing. But as far as, study strategy goes, scheduling time for free time, I know this is really important, and for exercise as well, just to keep the mental health in check. And also going to office hours and getting to know your professors, I think will help you not only in the classes, but also when you're applying medical school and looking for letters of rec and stuff like that. So those are my main tips.
Okay. And next we'll go to Kayla.
Yeah, so going to the gym, I think, was one of my biggest things that I kept to when I was studying for school. But just as Mandy said, stress reliever, and I guess managing. I did a lot of extracurriculars, so I don't know. You kind of just have to, how you have those 1-hour breaks between classes, like you actually have to utilize those, at least in the way I worked, I guess that's how I did it. And then I would save time later in the day, and then the gym time would be my free time because I actually enjoy the gym, but you don't have to go to the gym. Do something you like to do. Best study tips for just start learning how you learn best. That's like my biggest advice for my pre-general members is, like, if you study best by teaching others, then learn the material and then teach others. If you study best on your own, then take that time by yourself, limit distractions, or if you study best in groups. So just knowing that. And I do 1 hour studying, and then I'll give myself a 10-minute break. So that's how I stayed focused, was giving myself those breaks.
Okay, thank you. And Shawnee?
So I had a healthy mix of extracurriculars and coursework, but I actually probably worked the most. I worked a lot, and navigating full-time work with full-time school wasn't obviously an easy feat, but I think it got easier along the way. Over time, I really found a healthy balance, and a lot of that was just centered around being conscientious of the time that I did have available to me, and whether that was allocated to school or work or extracurriculars. And it felt like I was never not doing anything, but when it came to studying, I always made sure that I had a plan. So it's I have XYZ amount of hours available to me, and then I would set goals for myself. And if I felt like I was successful in meeting that goal, I always made sure that I had something planned next that I felt would be most useful for my time. And that's probably my best study tip, is just just being aware of, what your assignments are and what you have to do, and then prioritizing them. So yeah.
Okay, and Arisa?
Yeah, what everyone said is great. I was going to say too is to make your study time productive study time. I think it's easy to put in a lot of hours and not get anything done if you're just passive about it. So yeah, active study time is definitely the most helpful thing. I feel like I'm finally learning how to study, and I'm in grad school. How did I get through undergrad? I don't know, but yeah, use your time wisely, not just oh, I spent 5 hours studying, therefore I did a great job. try to make the most of that 5 hours and be active so that when you do take a break, you can feel good about it.
Okay, thank you. And Jacqueline?
Yes, I think everyone's spoken to balance like already. Yes, I won't repeat any of that, but I do agree with all of it. Another tip that I have is kind of shifting away from the mindset of studying because you have an exam coming up and just studying because you need to learn the material or you want to learn the material for your class. I don't always do this, but when I do, like I definitely feel way more prepared and way less stressed for my classes. And then also like even just when you go to office hours and things like that, it's not going to be the busiest week of the quarter because everyone's cramming last minute. It's just keeping up with the material and really learning it rather than just studying it for the purpose of an exam.
Okay, awesome. And Megan?
I think everyone else covered it like really well. I guess one more thing is just like if you make a schedule, stick to it. That took me a long time to figure out, but when I finally did, it worked out really well. And trying to like get to really know yourself and like be honest with yourself that like for me at least it was after class, I knew that if I went home, I would just talk to my roommates and I would get nothing done. So like being honest with myself and saying like, no, like that is not gonna be the right environment for you. Like go to the library for a little bit, then go home. Stuff like that.
Awesome. I think I got to everyone. Just call me out if I didn't. But so on to the next question. What was your favorite Cal Poly class? We'll start with Jacqueline on this one.
This is a tough question, but I think my favorite class was one of my upper division bio classes. It was the anatomy and physiology that focused on cardiorespiratory and renal physiology. This was actually one of the first classes I took online, and I thought they did a really good job of transitioning it online, but also just like the topics were super interesting to me. And then it was also, we talked a lot about how COVID affects your respiratory system. So that was kind of cool, just being able to like take a real world application. That was one of the first times that like, I feel like a class was really shifted and like changed the entire curriculum to meet what was relevant. So I just really enjoyed that class, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Megan?
For me, I think my favorite class was actually one of my GEs. I really liked my Shakespeare class. I know like lots of my friends hated GEs. They were like, why do I have to take these? Like, it's not my major. Da, da, da. But I thought like, I really enjoyed my GEs because I figured like, I'm never going to learn this stuff ever. Like, I'm just going to be science. So like, this is the great opportunity to do this. And so Shakespeare was super good. If Dr. Fitzhenry is still there and you need an upper div course, get him. He's the best professor ever.
Awesome. And go to Mandy.
I really enjoyed, I really like taking genetics. That's just something that was really interesting to me. Also, another one of the upper division anat and physiology classes. I really liked the endocrinology class. Again, that's just something I'm more interested in. I also took the volunteering and health professions class that Megan taught, and I really enjoyed that. You got like paired with to work with one of the places in the community, and I worked with drug and alcohol services through the public health department, and I really learned a lot, and I talked about it a lot on my application too. So hopefully you guys will take that at some point. I know with COVID and everything, but that was one of the classes I really enjoyed.
Okay, thank you. And Kayla?
I also really enjoyed genetics. I had Dr. Himmelblau, and I loved him. And I had him for like 2 other classes, and he wrote my letter of rec. And then I also really enjoyed developmental bio. I just thought it was super interesting. If I wasn't going into dentistry, I'd probably try and do something with that, but here I am.
Okay, Shawnee?
I was a child development minor, and honestly, a lot of those classes were like my favorite. So it's a hard choice, but I think probably like behavioral disorders in childhood was my favorite. So actually with my program, you got to like pick what specialty you want. And I think that class, played a big like role in why I wanted to do psychiatry. And while that class is like in childhood, that's something that also interests me, like that developmental period. But it like really focused on both like the environmental and biological factors that contribute to psychiatric disorders. So yeah, that one is like off the charts. And I also really liked microbio. I thought that class was really fun. So I know that might be like an unpopular opinion, but I thought it was really cool to like travel back into grade school and like play with a bunch of dyes and stuff. So yeah.
Arisa?
Yeah, I was going to say service learning too, and the health professions. That was one of my favorite classes. Just like really cool real life experience that you get. Very application worthy content, guys. That's what you want. Also, I took bioinformatics, which was really cool. Cool way to like get to see what your bio degree can do other than like a health profession, because like we get partnered with some computer science majors in that class, and you get to like solve real life problems with code. So that was cool. And then I was also going to say neurochem, but I don't think they're offering that class anymore because Dr. Meisenheimer isn't at Cal Poly. But if anyone is teaching neurochem, you should take it because it was a super cool class. You get to learn about like drugs and like what they do to the brain, and it's really cool.
Awesome. I think that's everyone. So the next question is, what kind of extracurricular experiences did you get involved in at Cal Poly? So this could be clinical, community service, leadership, research, or non-health related. And for this one, we'll start with Kayla.
Okay, so health or clinical, I guess I did. So I'm president of the Pre-Dental Society right now. And I joined my first year as a general member, and then I was marketing chair and then vice president, and then worked my way up, I guess. And yeah, having an academic or like a health profession, like leadership position, I think definitely helps because you can see like what the whole club does, and you're kind of seen as like, I don't know, I really enjoy helping our members when they ask a lot of questions about anything dental related or anything school related. So I really like helping through that. And then community service, I did volunteering at Pacheco, which is the like bilingual Spanish speaking English school. And that was probably one of my favorite experiences. And I talked about that in my personal statement. I would do like 2 hours a week, and I did that for like 3 quarters, and then until COVID hit. And then I was also on board for Filipino Cultural Exchange, and I kind of like still on like an officer in a way for like a subgroup of it. And that's like not academic related or anything. It's just kind of, that was like my social outlet type of club, I guess. And then I did research with Dr. France. It's an OChem lab. And then I had some positions for Camp Kesem, which is a nonprofit like college student run organization to help kids whose parents are affected by cancer. And that's like a great program because it's kind of the demographic that's forgotten. And I enjoyed going into that because my niece and nephew are part of that group, and they do the SDSU camp. So I think that's it. So.
Thank you. And we'll go to Megan.
So I did some volunteering at French Hospital for a little bit, and I was part of Relay for Life board for a year. But I think the main thing that I did while at Cal Poly was being a part of Pulse. So I joined Pulse the end of my second year, and then worked my way up to a leadership position. I was part of TLC, so like the alcohol and drug education team. And by my 4th year, like I was working there, doing the consultations and everything. So I was like there all the time. And I talked a lot about that experience in my applications. So if any of you guys are like underclassmen or not 4th years, but underclassmen and are thinking about joining that, I would really recommend it. I don't know how they're doing that now, or even if they are, how they're doing consultations. But it's awesome experience. And the big thing I did not do is I didn't do research in undergrad. I didn't have any research on my application. And I really freaked out about that for a long time, thinking like, how am I going to apply to medical school without research? But it's definitely possible if you're like, my application was really geared towards community service. So if you have like a different focus, that's okay. And you're not going to like fail and not get into a school just because you don't have research. So please don't freak out, because I freaked out a lot about it.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll go to Jacqueline next.
Okay, so let's see. For more like health related, like I already mentioned, I did some shadowing. I was also part of PolyFit, the fitness testing club on campus. So that was kind of cool just to see different students and community members. And then this past year, I started working at an optometry office, actually. So that's been a good way to actually get some hands-on experience and really prepare for that career. Community service, I've just kind of been doing stuff off and on throughout my time at Cal Poly. So most of it has been centered with the SLO Food Bank and then also Jack's Helping Hand. For my leadership positions, I am one of the peer advisors, so that's what I do. I'm also a student assistant for the honors program. So those are my main two things that I do for leadership roles. Like Megan, I didn't do any research either, and I don't really feel like that hindered me in applying, but it definitely was scary to not have that, but it turned out okay. And then a couple other things I've just for fun, like I did intramurals and things like that, just to show like you can still have like interest, like you don't have to do everything for the purpose of your application. Like you can do things for fun. Like I've done tutoring. I had an accounting internship, which was really weird did it for like every summer, but it's been surprisingly helpful. So that's also a little piece of advice is like, don't turn things down because they're kind of random. Like they might actually connect more than you think. And we talked about it a lot in one of my interviews too, which is kind of fun.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll go to Mandy next.
All right, yeah, so for health clinical experience, I did a decent amount of shadowing, like I said. I did the service learning in the health professions class, so I had the internship there. And then after I graduated Cal Poly, I did my scribing for a while, so I wrote about that a lot. Community service, I also volunteered with Camp Kesem for a few quarters, and I helped coordinate some charity events for the sorority I was in. I had, for leadership, I also had some leadership positions in my sorority. I was also one of the founding members of the Cal Poly Swim Club, so I wrote about that too. Research, I was part of family health research, which is under the kinesiology umbrella at Cal Poly. I like that a lot if you're looking into doing research that isn't necessarily bench work. And then non-health related, I was on the swim club, and then I also had a part-time job for my church.
Great, thank you. And we'll go to Shawnee next.
So for health clinical, starting my second year, I became a pharmacy technician, and I still do that now. So I've been doing that probably for about 4 years, but started while I was at Cal Poly. And while pharmacy really isn't my intended profession, it's definitely it has helped lay like a clinical foundation, and in some strange way has kind of solidified my decision to pursue nursing. As for community service, there was a Cal Poly CPR program that certified, students to be CPR instructors. So I did that, I think at the end of my first year or second year. So I taught some CPR classes, Stop the Bleed, like they certified you in everything. And that was really fun. And that was like pure volunteer work. For leadership, I was president of the nursing and PA club my senior year, and then vice president my junior year. And then research was actually the most formidable presence, especially like my last 2 years at Cal Poly. And I was a kinesiology major, and they have like the Center for Health Research there. And I got involved through the Frost summer research program, and then I kind of just stuck with it. And then got hired to be a student research assistant. So I basically worked with my faculty advisor that I started with the Frost program, and she basically mentored me my last 2 years at Cal Poly. And then I was, fortunate enough to work on some publications, and then I got to be like lead author on the last one I did. So that was really cool. And just like shout out to the Center for Health Research. It's really, if that's something that you're interested in, like it really is easy to kind of just dip your foot in the water, especially there. And a lot of the faculty advisors in the kinesiology department, they have really like unique research interests. So like you're bound to find something that you're interested in, and just pop your head in and say hello. And I think like that's a good way to get started.
Okay, and Arisa?
Yeah, so when I was at Cal Poly, I was in a variety of things, but I'd say that my health experience / clinical experience mostly started after I graduated, because I didn't know I wanted to do PA until after I graduated. So I worked as a medical assistant and also a physical therapy aide. And then the offices I worked for closed during COVID. And so then I worked as a caregiver and a speech therapy aide. So like a bunch of random things. I also mentioned I did some like random jobs before I decided to do PA. So it's cool getting some like business experience, some like tech experience, and got to do some like medical billing, which will be very useful in my career because it's very complicated. And then while I was at Cal Poly, let's see, I was in COSAM ambassadors, which is a super fun experience. I was a study session leader, so that was cool. And then I'd say like majority of my time was spent working at the biotech company in town called Promega. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but I worked as a research and development intern there doing OChem small molecule synthesis, which you'd think would not be very helpful in a job as a PA, but I had no idea what I wanted to do, and it was pretty fun. So that was a cool experience. Really cool actually getting to work like in an industry and like know what it's like to work on a team with like adults. So would recommend getting a job like that because it was a fun experience. Yeah, that's what I did.
Okay, thank you. And next question is, what entrance exam did you take and how did you prepare for it? And what classes were the most helpful to prepare? And we'll start with Mandy.
All right, so for medical school, I took the MCAT. I actually ended up taking it twice. I took it the first time after my junior year, and then I took it again this past year in June of 2020. So the second time I took it, I knew I still wanted to work full time at the job I was at to get more clinical experience. So I started studying like probably 7 or 8 months before the test, just like before, during lunch, after work, just putting in like a few hours a day, and then on weekends, just because I knew I wouldn't have a ton of time during the day. That ended up working for me. That might not work for everyone. But what classes were the most helpful to prepare? So important classes like OChem, you'll need to know. Physics, you'll need to know. Biochem was helpful, and so was like genetics and cell bio. Those were the main big topic classes that are helpful. But all of the upper division bio classes in anatomy and physiology will also be helpful. But those are the main ones that I think you get the most info from.
Thank you. And we'll go to Arisa next.
I took the GRE for PA school, and I was unemployed while studying for it because I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. So I basically just studied all the time, which is kind of like neither works well. Like Mandy was saying, working, like studying before and after work, like that's super hard. But then studying all the time too is super exhausting. So you just got to power through whatever you're schedule looks like. But in terms of classes that helped me, the GRE kind of sucks. So there wasn't really a class that like, it's like the SAT, but like a little harder. And so, yeah, I just say like focus on like get a book and just like do the whole thing. Like I didn't take a class or anything and I feel like I did fine. So if you can be disciplined with a book, that's definitely the best way to do it.
Thank you. And Jacqueline?
So I took the OAT for optometry school, and I took it this past summer. So I kind of procrastinated studying, and I studied for like 2 months while I was working a little bit. So I kind of balanced those two. What I did to prepare for it, I bought a book and I just read it front to cover and did all the practice problems. And then whenever there was like a topic that I was confused about, I watched videos in that topic. I also had an MCAT book, which for some reason is pretty helpful too, because it's kind of all the same subjects. So really just like being aware of like what you actually know versus like if you got a question right just because you guess, like that's not something you know. You have to actually like keep studying and finding other resources out there. In terms of classes, pretty much all the prerequisites were the most helpful. So like the Gen Chem, General Bio, and then the physics series, like that's pretty much the test right there. So any of those classes that I tried really hard in, I felt like I didn't have to study as much because I remembered it better. But like I know OChem, I kind of like didn't ever, some of the topics, I just never learned them the first time around. So that was more of a struggle because I had to teach them to myself rather than just like recall them. And then something else that is probably the most helpful was just doing a lot of practice tests. That's like the best way to assess how much you know and like how the test is going to go and look like.
Okay. Thank you. And Shawnee?
So my answer is going to be kind of short and sweet for this one. So I didn't have to take an entrance exam, thankfully. For nursing schools in general, you'll find probably like half of them don't require them at all. Maybe even like close to 75% of them. I don't know if that's like they're weeding that out or anything like that. So I didn't have to do the GRE. But they also have like GPA quotas. So like if you meet a certain GPA, then the test is not required. And like they'll tell you that like right off the boat. So like for my program, it wasn't even required at all.
Okay, great, thank you. And Kayla?
I took the dental admissions test, or the DAT, and there's something called DAT Bootcamp, and it's just as expensive as the test. But there's like six sections, and I took it the summer after my second year, which I thought was a good time because I had done the Gen Chem series, which is a section. I did OChem. I had just finished OChem, and I think we have a really good OChem program at Cal Poly. So that was like my best score on the test, and I didn't really study for it either. What else? The intro bio series was super helpful, and I think I took genetics and like microbiome before, and so that was helpful. And then what else? There's like a reading section. That's not really a skill you can build in that like in a short time, but there's also a PA section, perceptual ability section. So that's like angle ranking. It's a whole thing. There's like games you can play. That was like my favorite section. I just viewed it as like a game type situation when I was studying. And then I studied for like a month and a half. And I was also doing like research in the summer. So I just had to find that balance that worked. And yeah, I didn't study. I know like some people study for the DAT for like, they have a schedule and it's like 8 to 10 hours a day and they have one day off, but like mine was pretty, I would say, relaxed, and I still did fine. So yeah.
Thanks, Kayla. We'll go to Megan.
So I graduated Cal Poly with like a lowish GPA, so I knew I had to like kill the MCAT for medical school, and So I sort of went like all in. I got a tutor that we did like online stuff with like strategy for the test, because it's a lot of it is like strategic. A lot of it is just like take it, like practice the test over and over and over again and get that rhythm down. And one thing I like really recommend is doing more practice than content review, because you're never going to be able to like study it all. You're never going to know it all. So do a little bit of content review and then do tons of practice problems. I did like 6 or 7 practice tests, and I did them all in a simulated environment. So like I went to the library, like earplugs in, had the like, you know, like the breaks, no phone, no nothing. And I think that really helped because it's about stamina for like a 6-hour plus test. So I just can't stress enough, like practice, 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 and it'll really help you a lot. And just like everyone said with those, like the courses from Cal Poly, like those core like bio classes and some of the upper div ones help too.
I think we got to everyone with that question, so we'll move on to the next one. So for whom did you get, from whom did you get recommendation letters, and when and how did you start developing a professional relationship with them for your letter writers? We'll start with Shawnee for this one.
Okay, so for nursing school, it varied from like 2 to 4 recommenders. But like generally my recommendation letters came from 2 faculty department people, and then the other 2 were for people that I worked with. So I also worked like for CSM advising for a little bit. But I think, I mean, it can be a little bit scary, like trying to build a relationship, especially because you're like kind of worried about coming off as interesting in some way. But I feel like the more that you get to know them, that anxiety kind of virtually disappears. And it does take considerable effort. Like I probably started being proactive and trying to build a relationship with my recommenders like my 2nd year. And a lot of that was just like getting to know them while letting them get to know you too. So like if it's a professor that you have in mind, like just pop your head in and say hello, like ask them about the thing that they mentioned in class for like 2 seconds. Whether that was in class or in office hours, and then just, or like let them know that you enjoyed your class, like be intentional. And it, you know, it becomes less about like just trying to get like a recommendation letter. Like I genuinely enjoyed all of the people that I got my recommendations from. And I think that a lot of times it's like one of those things that kind of like push you over. So it is worthwhile, you know, in every sense of the way. So yeah.
Thank you. We'll go to Kayla next.
I got my letter recs from Dr. Himmelblau and Dr. France, and then we also have to get, so you have to get like 2 science faculty and then a dentist. So I got Dr. Himmelblau and Dr. France, and with Dr. Himmelblau, he wrote more of my like academic side because I had 3 classes with him, and I always went into office hours, so that's like, I know not everyone goes, but like that's a big way you can kind of stand out and show you're serious about school. And I don't know, one of the big things that Dr. Himmelblau noticed was like I like chose to sit in the front of class. It was just like a small thing, but he noticed. So, and then Dr. France, I did research with, and I just like, we just talk a lot. Like he likes to get to know students. So it was really easy to build that personal relationship with him. So he wrote more about my like extracurriculars and like, I guess my character outside of school. And then my general dentist that I got a letter of rec from, I shadowed with her end of my first year, and then I worked for her last summer. So she wrote mine. And I guess with Dr. France, just going back to that, I asked him like 2nd quarter when I first like had him, And then I like reminded him end of my third, like a month before that, or 2 months before I was supposed to have him submit it. And he was like super nice, and it was easier pre-COVID because like you could kind of in a way bother them if they didn't get to your email. I know it's harder for people right now because you can't just pop your head in. So hopefully that changes.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Megan.
So I got a letter from a bio professor and a biochem professor and 2 of my supervisors at Pulse and a doctor I currently scribe for. And I actually never went to office hours. I never really had time and just like always conflicted with their hours. But I made an effort of like participating in class. So like when the professor would ask questions and like nobody raises their hands, I would be that person that raised their hand. So they got to know me that way and just like talking to them during class, I guess. Yeah, it was really stressful. Like it was mentioned before, to ask for a letter. I was like freaking out. But then when I asked, they were like, oh yeah, of course. Like, that was it. Like, they're there to help us. Like that's part of their job. They get tons of letter requests. It's not a big deal. Like just press send. I was like hovered over that button forever. But yeah, it was actually easier than I thought it was going to be.
Okay, thanks, Megan. And we'll go to Mandy.
Yeah, so when I was applying to medical school, I tried to look through the schools I applied to, and I realized a lot of schools have different requirements for what kind of letters of recommendation they want. So I asked for kind of a lot of letters just to cover my bases, really. So I had 2 bio professors. I asked for a non-academic professor. I had my choir director who taught my choir classes write it. I have the 2 doctors that I work for write one. I had the research professor that I worked for write one. And then I had the supervisor for my drug and alcohol internship write one. So kind of same with everyone else. I went to office hours a lot for all my classes, and I tried to sit near the front. I kind of wish I asked for like the letters of recommendation when I was still at Cal Poly. I didn't really realize when I was going to be applying, so I didn't ask for letters until after I graduated. And I kind of thought that might be an issue, like, oh, has it been too long? But professors do remember you, even if it's been a few quarters since you've been there, if you go to office hours and you try to make a good impression with them. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. And for me personally, I wish I could have gotten a letter of recommendation from a DO, since I did apply to a lot of DO schools. That wasn't really something that I could do because of COVID. I didn't really have an opportunity to shadow a DO. But if you are interested in applying to both MD and DO, I would try to get a letter of rec from one of each.
Thanks, Mandy. And we'll go to Arisa next.
Yeah, so for PA school, they're kind of all over the place about what their requirements are. It varies from like 2 to 5. And so I ended up getting 5 letters. Don't think that you need to, but I just felt like because my clinical hours were lower than other applicants that I needed to compensate somehow. So I got 5 letters. And one thing that I was nervous about was because it had been like a year since I had graduated, that professors wouldn't remember me, or yeah, that like it's been a while since they like saw my name. And so I'd say like if you're trying to decide like, do I want to do a gap year? Do I not want to do a gap year? If that's something that you're considering, then one thing you can be intentional about is continuing communication with the professors that you think that you might ask for a letter. So whether that be just like checking in through an email, be like, hey, this is what I'm up to now. Like I did that and I think it really paid off. With the professor that wrote my letter, I ended up having, there's supposed to be 2 professors that wrote my letter. One of them fell through for like circumstances on her end. And so I got one professor to write my letter. And I had continued to be in contact with her after I graduated, which was really helpful. And then the other 4 letters, 3 of them were like bosses / supervisors of mine in various jobs that I had. So I think that the admissions was able to see that I like very professional, and like they get to see you from like your boss's perspective. And then the last one was a physician that I shadowed regularly. So he saw me in like that clinical setting and shadowing. I think that like I needed, I think if I had gone back, I would have gotten a PA recommendation as well. I didn't have any PAs that wrote my letters. And like circumstances were such that I wasn't able to shadow more often because of COVID. But if any of you are a PA, if you can get a PA to write one of your letters, I think that would be really helpful.
Thanks, Risa. We'll go to Jacqueline next.
So for me, pretty much all the schools that I applied to asked for one from an optometrist, one from a science professor, and one from a supervisor or someone who's seen you in a position outside of the classroom. So that's what I did. Everyone else pretty much already covered, like, make sure you have a relationship established. It doesn't need to be like, you don't need to be best friends with your professor to ask them. Like, don't be intimidated by that, but also like pick a class where you've made the intention to be present during class, participate, like be a good student and be able to show that. And then I also think it's important to have somebody who knows your character really well. So like for me, that was my supervisor, and I felt like that was a pretty easy one. And then in terms of like having someone in a profession that you're hoping to go into, it's nice to have someone who works in that profession be able to speak about how you would do in that same profession, because they're the ones who ultimately live it. So they can say like, oh, this person would make a good, optometrist in my case, or dentist or doctor, or whatever qualities you need to be successful there. And then as soon as I knew that I was applying for this cycle, I just emailed them and asked, basically, because it was when we were online, so I couldn't go in and speak to them in person. And then I basically just gave them kind of my general timeline and said I'd follow up when it gets closer and when I'll actually need it. But just providing that heads up if you can is definitely considerate and helpful for you also to have assurance and like written proof, like, okay, you have them set and everything's good to go.
Okay, thanks, Jacqueline. And the next question. So let's see. How did you prepare your personal statement, and what type of information did you include in the essay? And we'll start with Jacqueline on this one. I'm actually going to have her call the panelists after. I need to step away super quickly. So Jacqueline will kind of direct things for a minute. So.
All right. So starting with myself, so my personal statement, I tried to keep it pretty anecdotal and at least be able to show some of my personality and like what is important to me too, like trying to make sure your values come through in it, I think is important. I think it's easy to kind of just make it a resume, but that's not the point. Like you want to show like what's important to you and why you'd be a good fit for this. So that's what I did. I actually had a hard time like trying to make myself like sound like I would be a good fit. So like I would say first start with like whatever story you're trying to tell. And then after that, like once you're doing the review, you can add in things to like kind of like spruce it up. Like, this is an experience I've done that supports why I'd be good at this or why this isn't a value for me. So I started off with more of the storytelling. And then I had some appointments with the advisors and they helped me add in more relevant experiences to make it better. So I would definitely recommend utilizing those resources on campus too. They're really helpful in terms of reviewing your personal statements, but that's what I did for mine. So next we'll just go to Mandy.
Yeah, so I would say give yourself a lot of time to write your personal statement and review it a lot. I went through a bunch of drafts. I kept changing kind of the angle I wanted to go at it. But I think kind of what I decided on is that I started on kind of like what inspired me to go into medicine. And then as I kind of went through my essay and talked about my experiences, I kind of ended with talking about the type of physician I want to be and kind of my mission as a future physician. So that's what I did. I had a bunch of people read my essay too, to help get it just right, get a bunch of people to read. I had my mom read like all of my essays and all of my secondaries and stuff. Just having a second eye look at everything is just really helpful and really reassuring. And if anyone's applying this cycle, I also had an opportunity to write about how COVID has impacted my application. I kind of use that as another opportunity to talk about like not only how is it like impacted my application, but also how it impacted me as a future physician and how I'm going to use what I learned working in COVID as a physician. So I think it's kind of important to like spin all your questions you can to how it's impacted you, what you've learned from it, and what you will use in the future. Yeah.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Kayla.
Yeah, so I wrote mine last year. I also did a lot of anecdotes. I didn't write anything. I think I only included like 2 things from like my application because I wanted to include other experiences that weren't on my application already. So UCLA has like an ASDA pre-dental health club, I guess. So they had us paired up with like a current student, and then they would like read our stuff and then give us feedback. So that was my first thing, and then I had some other current dental students read my stuff and give me feedback. But then I also went through the pre-health advising center and did like the personal statement meetings. So I met mostly with Megan, and she was super helpful. She gave me some insight on my essay that like kind of tied all my anecdotes together that I don't think I would have seen without her. And then what else? Yeah, also I had Mandy, I had my parents read it, and it's kind of hard with outside sources because they have kind of a limited time frame to be able to read it. So like to have my parents nitpick through it with me for every like comma and whatever, because we only have 4,000 characters, like that was super, super helpful for me too.
Thanks, Kayla. And now we'll go to Shawnee.
So for like my personal statement, sometimes they had like some questions that they kind of wanted you to answer, and at least like in my experience. So like I would sometimes copy and paste the directions and or the questions like in the document, just so I always had something to reference. And I worked on really making like outlines or skeletons of those. And a lot of times like I would have like bouts of inspiration or some like random comment that I wanted to include come about, and like I just kind of inserted it where I felt like it fit best. And I talked about my background quite a bit. But a lot of the times, like I also relayed like what meaning I derived from my professional, like my personal and academic experiences, and kind of like coalesce those together to show how they like paved my path to nursing, and how they kind of just those experience, how they made my choice to pursue it make sense, and how they like really helped shape who I want to be and like who I want to impact. And also like picking back off of what someone said earlier was like having a lot of eyes look at your paper. I had so many people look at them. It was kind of like, now I can't even like keep track of who it was, but like I even had one of my recommenders take a look, and I got some pretty like valuable feedback that, you know, even at some points like dramatically changed how my paper was written. But I think each draft is better than the last. So that's why I would say like also have a lot of people take a look at it, and just, you know, kind of being open to whatever comments that they have.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll do Megan.
So I completely agree with everyone else. I don't really have much to add. I think the only thing is was like really reflecting a lot on like basically your life and like all the experiences that brought you to where, like, to the point of applying to whatever school you're applying to. I know like me personally, I'm not good at reflections. So I would like sort of make myself sit there, and I had like this notebook and my pencil and just like I just made myself just write whatever, like whatever experiences came to mind. And then from that, I had like tons of pages, and I could just like read through and see like what things sort of went together, and like could make a cohesive narrative from that. So don't be afraid to just like start writing. It doesn't have to be like beautiful at the beginning. Just like blurt out anything that comes to mind. And then I really got a lot of help from Megan with the pre-health advising. So even if you graduate and take gap years, like I'm taking a total of 3 gap years, I guess, 2 then the application year. I like still reached out and was able to connect virtually and get a lot of help there.
All right, and Arisa?
Yeah, I would also say reach out to Megan or whoever you are close with at the pre-health center, because that was super helpful for me even too after I've graduated. Just start writing down stories, like tiny little interactions that have been meaningful for you, even if you think that it's not important. So like for me, when I was writing my essays, I like haven't had like a huge like, and this is why I'm in medicine moment. So I was like, what do I write about? But they can be little stories, like this one patient one day and they had this conversation, and that can be it. And like if you start writing those down, later you can look back and you can kind of like piece it together and make an essay, but it's going to be so much more helpful if you have those stories on paper. So it's funny because one of the like main central stories that I wrote about happened while I was writing my essay. So then like I was writing my essay, I was like, this thing happened. I was like, this is very essay worthy information. And so I like totally redid my essay and was like, this is what I'm writing about now. But like when you have that mindset of like, oh, like that was a really meaningful experience to me, and this is like why I want to be in medicine, like then you can start writing your essay, right? But start early. It doesn't mean you have to be writing your essays early, but you want to be thinking about that so you can be writing down those stories early.
All right, awesome. That's it for this question. And then Connor will introduce the next one now.
Okay, thanks, Jacqueline. So the next question is to please briefly describe the application process for your profession. And so just some guiding questions here. Did you apply directly to schools or through a centralized application service? How many schools did you apply to, and what was the overall cost? What information was included in the application process? So transcripts, coursework, essays, test scores. And how long did it take you to complete the application? And when did you submit your application? And we'll start with Megan on this one.
Okay, so I applied to medical school. I applied mainly to MD schools and a few DO schools. So they're 2 separate application services. I think I applied to like 25-ish to 30 MD schools and maybe like 6 DO schools. It ended up being a lot of money. I think it was like a few $1,000s with like secondaries. So first you submit the primary, which is your personal statement and like your activities and stuff like that. Then the school starts sending out secondaries, which each could be like, I don't know, like $80 to $100 or $120. And so that just really added up. So the entirety of like the whole application, like personal statement, I started in January. And like application service opens up, like the portal opens up in May. So then I would like took the month to do the activities sections, sent in my application like the day after it opened, to just like get done with it really early. And then once secondaries came in, I tried to turn those over pretty quickly. So yeah, it was a lot of time, a lot of money.
Okay, thank you. And Shawnee?
So many of the schools I applied to had like their own application. So like you kind of just make your own account with each school. But I did use like the nursing cast, which is like the central service for one of them. And it felt like that one was probably a little bit more difficult and time consuming. Overall, I applied to 7 schools, and I probably spent close to like $500 in application fees. I was lucky enough to just get one waiver, but one is, I'm grateful. So, I mean, speaking more for like the central service, nursing CAS is definitely more extensive on like the transcript and the coursework requirements. So it does take a little bit longer. So if you do have applications that go through that, I would probably recommend getting started on those first. You know, some applications have like their short essay questions that were just exclusively short essay questions, whereas other ones had like 2 or 3 long essay prompts. One of those being your personal statement. And then for the nursing CAS, it kind of feels like, or sometimes, you know, even for the ones that had their own application, it kind of feels like filling out like a job application because they want you to be descriptive on your volunteer and paid work. And I would say that probably like my first application took me the longest. It was probably like a month and a half. But then after, like I started getting through them a little bit quicker, like especially after probably the third one. And I would say that all my applications were probably submitted by early January, and I started in August.
Okay. Thanks, Shawnee. And we'll go to Arisa next.
Yeah, so every PA school does it differently, but they all use CASPA, which is like the centralized application, or basically all of them. All the schools I applied to did. And so I ended up applying to 15 schools, and the application opens in April, and a lot of them are on rolling admission. So the best advice I'm going to give you, sorry, there's like sirens going by. Best advice I can give you is submit your application as early as you can, because like the earlier you apply, the higher your chances are of getting in. So I submitted mine second week of May. So it took me 3 weeks to do the application, but I was like had all my essays written before the application opened. So when it opened, I basically just took 3 weeks to like put everything in, which is longer than I needed, but I wanted to make sure I didn't mess up. So, and like the timeline for the schools are weird too, because they're all going to start at different times and they're all going to interview at different times. Like I'm in PA school now and I just got into another PA school. I'm like in class and I'm still hearing back from other schools. So it's like so weird how the timing is, but you know, it's going to work out in the end. And yeah, so that's just what I'm going to say.
Okay, thank you. And Jacqueline?
So I applied to 6 schools, I think, and then they were all using the centralized service, which was OptumCAS. So there is a base fee to use the service, I think like $200-ish, and then there's another fee for every additional school that you add after your first one. So it was somewhere around like $500 to apply, which was kind of a lot, but not the worst, I guess. And then there's supplemental applications, which we'll talk about later, but those have more fees to them. It's basically the same stuff everyone's talked about: transcripts, coursework, your test scores. And then there was a pretty extensive like activities section where you can put anything. I think the categories you could do were like community service, volunteering based things, employment, and then just general extracurriculars. So that probably took me the most time in terms of just like summarizing everything in the concise like space that they give you. And then the personal statement, a couple schools had their own like supplemental questions embedded into the centralized application, but most of them required a whole nother like secondary application later. And similar to Arisa, mine was, most of them are rolling admission. So I tried to be on top of it. It opens in, I think, July. So I started it right when it opened and was working on it for a little bit. I was also studying for the OAT and writing my personal statement kind of at the same time. So I didn't end up completely submitting everything, I think, until November. Schools say that if you have it done by December, that's considered early for rolling. So that made me feel a lot better. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
And Mandy?
All right, so I applied to both MD and DO. So that's the AMCAS and ACOMAS are the 2 different application systems for that. They're mostly the same. I think one of the differences was that on the AMCAS, so that's the MD application, you get to put 3 of your most meaningful experiences, and then you get more characters to describe them. So that was really useful. And then this year, the DO application had a separate essay to talk about COVID. And then there was also a couple of schools that had supplemental questions on the primary application there. I, like Megan, I think applied to like 25 or 30 schools total, but I probably did between 15 and 17 DO schools, and then the rest MD schools. What was needed, transcript. Cal Poly, I felt like getting the transcript uploaded was pretty easy, but I heard some people who took community college classes that it took time for those to get uploaded to the application. So if that's you, maybe think about working on getting your transcript a little bit early. And then I applied during 2020. So technically the MCAT wasn't required before applying, but most schools did put your application on a hold if you didn't have the MCAT. So like you could technically submit your application, but then they would put it on hold before reviewing it or giving you an interview. So how long did it take you to complete your application? It took me, after I took my MCAT, it probably took about another month for me to submit my applications. I worked on them a little bit before doing my MCAT, but most of the bulk work was after I took my MCAT. I was one of the unfortunate few whose MCAT got postponed because of COVID. Luckily, it was only pushed back from April to June. I know a lot of people that got pushed back to like September or October or November, which is pretty late to be applying. So I wasn't able to submit until July, which is a little bit on the later side. It's not terribly late, but I would definitely recommend applying as soon as those applications open if you can, because I think that would have helped me out a little bit. But unfortunately, it wasn't really in my control.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Kayla next.
Let's see. So we have a centralized, so dental schools have a centralized application service through the ADEA. And then Texas, if you apply to Texas schools, they have their own application process. But I think I applied to 12 schools, and then I like followed through with 10. But let's see. So I started my personal statement early spring quarter, and then the application opened for us. It got pushed back because of COVID, but I think it opened I want to say May 15th. And then we had a month to get it done. Well, not really. You have like a while to get it done. But for me, I kind of set myself to, I wanted to get it in within 6 weeks because, again, it's like a rolling admission or a rolling application process. So I wanted to get it in early, and that's still considered like pretty early. And it was like our first quarter online, and I was in like a good amount of units and doing research still. So I was kind of busy, especially during like finals week when we were able to submit. That was like during finals week. So I pushed mine like 2 weeks back. So I submitted July 14th, and so that was still technically considered early. And then I got my first interview like in August. Yeah, so transcripts, I did a class at Foothill, and that was a pretty easy transcript to get. Cal Poly's is like probably, it was easier to get. And then coursework, there's like specific requirements for dental school. Test scores. Yeah, and then just like all your basics, I guess, for an application. Yeah, it took me like 6 weeks. And then, is there anything else? I know some people submit it like the day of, but I mean, another thing, because we have a Facebook group, I guess. So some people submitted the first day, and something you kind of have to keep in mind if you're seeing that type of stuff is like some people are on the semester system, so they get out in May. So that's like kind of what I was telling myself. Like I wasn't really late submitting, but I was just like later than them. I just told myself they had more time. So yeah.
Okay, I think that was everyone for that question. And we do have one question specifically for the medicine panelist from an attendee. So Lizzie, if you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm applying to MD programs this June, and just looking at the internet, probably too much for advice, but I feel like I've seen conflicting information on like how many stories you should include, and I'm really struggling on how to balance stories and reflection without kind of having like paragraph of story, then reflection, and paragraph of story, reflection. And I'm also like struggling with not describing medicine to the like committee that's going to read that essay. So, but still showing an understanding and a passion for it. So I'm wondering if you can share kind of how you balance that. Any advice would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, so Megan or Mandy, if either of you want to tackle that.
Yeah, so I'll guess I'll go a little bit more into how I did my personal statement. I kind of try to think about like, what is my personal mission as a physician? Where do I want to see myself? How do I want to treat my future patients? And then how can I use my experiences to kind of reflect in that eye? So I kind of realized that I'm really passionate about preventive medicine. And so I kind of talked about how like I want to be a physician so I can not only treat but prevent chronic illnesses. And so I kind of used all of my experience, just like briefly explained why I joined them from that lens and how they've affected and kind of built towards that personal mission of mine. I like opened my personal statement with like a story, as you will, like kind of in the perspective of one of my abroad shadowing experiences. And then the rest of my experience, I kind of just kind of describe certain events during my extracurriculars that again reflected towards that personal goal. So yeah, I think it's a lot of not only reflecting on what you learn specifically from the experience, but also how it reflects on how you see yourself in the future and the type of provider or PA physician, how you see yourself in the future. I hope that kind of helps.
Yeah, I agree with Mandy. That was like one of the hardest things for me. That's why I was like smiling a little bit when you were asking that question, because I'm like, oh, how do I answer this? Honestly, like if it's okay, like I'd be willing to send you my personal statement so you can sort of get like an example. I think that really helps, like read an example to see sort of how it goes. So if I could like somehow get your contact information, I could send that over to you. I think
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll send you my email in the chat. So thanks so
Okay.
much. Thank you also,
Cool.
Mandy. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you both for doing that. So the next question now, we'll move on, is did you have a secondary application to complete? If you did, what type of info was required? How much time did you spend on the secondary application? And when was the secondary application due? And for this one, we'll start with Jacqueline.
So I never actually did them. I had a few and I started them, I looked at them, and then I ended up getting into the school I wanted to go to. So I just kind of abandoned them. But the questions were mostly just more specific, like, why do you want to go to this school? Or can you tell us about like a leadership experience or service? Like, what does that mean to you? One of them was kind of cool. You had to watch a TED Talk. And I wrote a lot of the essays too for them, and then talk about what that means to you and how it applies to the career. But sorry, I'm reading the question again to make sure I didn't miss anything. They're due. I don't entirely know the timeline for when they were due. It was rolling, so I was just trying to have a due date for myself. I was like, okay, I'll submit these by the end of like December. It was my timeline. I think most things were due officially around March, I want to say. And that's pretty much all I have because I didn't do much for it.
Okay. Thank you. And Kayla?
I had a couple. I didn't have secondaries for all of my school applications. I had maybe like 4 out of the 10. 2 of them I decided not to do because I eventually like figured out that that was a school I didn't really want to go to, like based on values or like how it aligned with like how I wanted to be as a dentist, I guess, and with my practice. And another thing I forgot to mention was schools for dental school. It's like $200 to submit. It's like around $200 to submit the first school, and then every subsequent school is like it's like $138 or something like that. And then they have their own application fees on top of that, like $70 to $90. So it gets pretty expensive pretty fast, at least I know for dentistry. I know med is like a little less per school, but yeah, that was just a side comment.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. And we'll go to Mandy next.
Yeah, so if you're applying to medical school, you're going to get a lot of secondaries. I don't think I was prepared for how many secondaries I was going to get and how quickly you get them. Basically, after your application gets like approved, there's like a screening process for all the applications that usually takes about 3 to 4 weeks. And then a large majority of the schools, if you meet their prerequisites, they'll just send you a secondary right away. So I was a little bit shocked when I woke up one morning and had like 12 secondaries in my email. So I would say big piece of advice is that you can start writing your secondaries while you're still waiting for your primary application to be approved. A lot of the schools will use the same secondaries from the prior year, so you can just Google what the secondary was. And a lot of schools have really similar secondaries. So like, obviously there's going to be one about like why this school. A lot of them have like describe a time you've worked with like an underserved community. There's usually one talking about a teamwork experience or a hardship. And then this year, a lot of schools had one talking about COVID. So just kind of pre-writing those, I think would help a lot. How much time did you spend completing the secondary applications? I try to complete each secondary application within 2 weeks of getting it. I didn't quite do that for every school, but that was my personal goal. Most secondaries didn't have like a super strict due date. There's a couple that said to complete within like 3 to 4 weeks of getting it, but the majority of them, like the due date for the secondary was like March of this year when I got them back in like August. But I think the general rule of thumb for med school is that try to complete it within a couple weeks, or really just as quickly as possible since they are rolling.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Arisa next.
Yeah, I had a similar experience as those who were talking about med school. Every school's a little different and they all make you pay money to turn in your supplementary. So like it really varies from like $50 to like $100. USC was weird and they made me like mail them a cashier's check, which is like, that's weird. Like you could just get money online, but I don't know why they did that. But I didn't start writing my secondary essays until I got the essays, and there were just so many, and they were all littler, like they're shorter essays. But I got to use the same list of stories, the ones that I didn't use those stories. So that list of stories is going to be helpful for you. And yeah, I would also say I took about 2 weeks after I got the secondaries to turn them in. For PA school, it's kind of like some just send you the secondary automatically after you meet their prerequisites. Some will only send you a secondary if they like you, like if you meet their first round of admissions. And so you have to look into the school to see kind of like what it means when you get a secondary. You're like, how far am I along in the path? But yeah, I'd say just try to do it as quickly as possible. That's kind of like your priority, your top priority once you get those essays, is to kind of crank them out as fast as you can.
Okay, thank you. And Shawnee?
Short and sweet. I did not have any secondary applications.
Okay, thank you. And Megan?
The only thing I would add, like Mandy covered it pretty well, is that just like pre-write, like just try to like your best to write as much as possible before you even get the secondary, because that'll help you so much, because you're gonna be like drowning in secondaries, you're gonna be stressed out. There's a few that I didn't do just because I was a little lazy and I was like, I don't even want to go there anyways. So just pre-write.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. So the next question, we're getting down to the last few here. So how did you determine what schools to apply to? So what did you consider, like the curriculum, location, cost, etc.? And for this one, we'll start with Shawnee.
So I kind of had like my top three. First one was probably their mission. So like a lot of nursing schools have like a really, individualized mission, and community health is like a good reason why I wanted to go into nursing, and I wanted to attend a school that really centralizes their efforts in both like inclusivity and diversity, but also just like giving back to the neighborhoods that they serve. Location was also really important for me because I picked schools, I intentionally picked schools that I envisioned myself both living and working. So like keeping in mind the connections that you make in grad school, they're, in the surrounding area. So I wanted to be okay with working in the areas, post grad school, if that happened to be the case. And then obviously cost was like a really big one to me, but over time it became like less and less important. And the other two kind of just like outweighed them. So those are kind of like my top.
And Megan?
So a big thing I used for the MD schools was MSAR. So I think it's like $30. You get a year subscription to look at all the schools, basically see like everything about the school, like what GPA, like the past year students that were accepted, the MCAT, like basically like the metrics of what, like the kind of students they usually accept. And I really geared my list using that first to make sure that I wasn't trying to like apply to like Harvard when my stats weren't there, because it's like, why am I going to spend my money on this? So really trying to get schools that fit my stats. And then I started narrowing down of like, for me, location was really important. So using location, and then some of like the extracurricular stuff they would offer, like the kind of communities they work with, what they're known for. So lots of like research, doing research online, like checking out the schools, the area, and curriculum less so, just because I didn't even know what that meant at the time. But yeah, definitely recommend if you're applying to medical school, getting MSAR, because it'll help you a lot.
Okay, thanks, Megan. And Jacqueline?
So there's only, I think, like 14 optometry schools, so I didn't have a lot to pick from. I started looking more at location and cost, just kind of where I would want to go, and that's how I decided where to apply. Also looked a lot at their clinical education. I felt like that's where they varied more than just the curriculum itself, and that was important to me. And then once it got down to it, honestly, like more about their missions, like some schools really care about research and everyone that goes there is doing research, whereas other ones care a lot about like community service and they're going in to classrooms in your first year. So just finding what works for you. I mean, there's obviously a fit for everybody, but I kind of had my values and priorities. So I tried to find a school that matched that. And then also just throughout the application process, you can kind of get, I don't really know a better way to say this, but like a vibe from the schools. Like some of them were super welcoming and just like seemed like a really good like fit, and other schools like were a little bit not as much and like a little bit colder. So just kind of figuring that out, and like through the process, you can make connections and see how it fits like what you're looking for at the school.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Kayla next.
So for my, let me just, I decided I kind of asked my like alumni from Cal Poly who got into dental schools, like I kind of asked them for advice on where to apply, since they had already gone through the interview process, and they got to do in-person interviews, so they got like I guess like a truer idea of how the school was. So that kind of directed me a lot. Plus they, some had like spreadsheets or like Excel sheets that kind of broke it down for me already. There's also like another source, but I didn't use it, but I think it's like DAT. It was like the ADEA, DAT, or ADEA school or dental school like booklet. I know some people use that and it was really useful. Let's see what else. I mean, I kind of looked at a location, but I initially at the beginning of my application process, I wasn't feeling too confident about like my stats and stuff. So I kind of just applied to where I thought I could get in, or like where my stats were above the average. So I had kind of a safety. I had some reaches and I had some like that I thought I could fit in, but yeah, so location I kind of threw out the window and thought like I would only be there for a couple years, so I didn't think of too much of it. But eventually, once I got deeper into that application process with interviews and stuff, like seeing how the faculty were treating me during interviews, as well as like how, if I had a student interview, like how they talked about the school and what they focused on when they talked about the school. Like some talked mostly about the atmosphere, while others talked more about like sim lab and like clinical. So that gave me an idea of what the school's priorities were. I also, I guess for like getting acceptances, getting like acceptances, I ended up considering cost because dental school is really expensive, like a lot of other like health professional programs. So I kind of considered cost towards the end, but then UOP is like the second most expensive school, but I decided to go with that program because it's an accelerated 3-year program instead of 4. So I like kind of valued my time more over money.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. And we'll go to Arisa next.
Yeah, I think that when I was starting to apply, honestly, I looked at like the US rankings of PA schools because I just had no idea of like where each of them stand. It's pretty similar to like where their medical schools stand, but some of them are a little different. And then also just like where I wanted to live was a big one. And I knew a couple people in PA schools, so I applied to like the schools that they went to, given that they had good experiences as well. A piece of advice that I would give is don't be afraid to apply to a school that might be a reach for you or that you just don't think that you would get into. I didn't think I was going to get into Cornell, and like here I am. So like if you want to move somewhere and you think it would be like a dream school of yours, like go for it. I mean, in the grand scheme of how much you're going to be paying to go to school, like the application fee is not going to be a whole lot. So that's another piece of advice that I would give. And how did I decide to go here? One thing is that my program has a surgical focus, which I thought was really unique for a PA program. And so that's what drew me here. And then also their clinical rotations are a little different. So a lot of programs have like set rotations that you have to do, and then like maybe 1 or 2 elective rotations. And my school has 10 set rotations and then 5 electives. So we have a lot of freedom in terms of where we get to do our clinical time, which I was excited about. And yeah, I think that when you're applying, you might not necessarily know that. So like cast a broad net, and then as things get narrowed down, you can be like more picky and dive a little deeper into like what each school has to offer.
Okay, thank you. And Mandy?
Yeah, so kind of what Megan was saying, definitely use the MSAR, and then if you're doing DO, they have like a similar thing to that. I think it's just called Choose DO or something. So I made a little Excel sheet and I tried to narrow down some schools that I thought were kind of goals for mine based on my stats. I tried to do some reach schools, but then schools that I thought were more realistic for me. Location was also something that was important to me. So I did end up applying to mostly California and West Coast schools, but I did apply to a few here and there that were all over the US. And then from that, I try to focus on the school's mission statement and how it reflected with the type of physician I wanted to be. So like I've said, like I'm really interested in primary care, preventive medicine. I'm also interested in like rural health and working with underserved populations. So for me, that's kind of mainly why I applied to a lot of DO schools. That tends to be the mission statement for a lot of them. And I got interested in learning about OMM when I was applying to DO schools. But then of course I also applied, there are a lot of MD schools that also have a similar mission. So that's kind of how I narrowed down the list.
Thanks. I think that was everyone for that question. So the next one is, what were your interviews like and how did you prepare? And for this one, we'll start with Kayla.
So my first interview was like mid-August, which I wasn't expecting because usually all the advice and like all the online forums I had read through said that most interviews start in September. So I kind of wasn't prepared for the first one, but I think that's okay. And they told me on a Wednesday and they told me that my interview was on Friday. So I didn't exactly have a lot of time to prepare either. But yeah, online interviews were interesting. I feel like they did a pretty good job adjusting given the circumstances. But I definitely think that in person would give a better feel for how the school is and like just your small interactions with students. Like when you're, I don't know, at lunch, because it's like a whole day experience for dental school. You get like, some schools have like an essay you do, and then you do like a student interview, and then like a lunch, and then faculty interviews, and then they do like informational sessions. So like about the school's curriculum and financial aid usually. So I think it was kind of harder to get that full experience because you're only limited to those who like logged into a Zoom call. So preparing for my later interviews, I had a friend who's also applying to med school at the same time. So we kind of just like bounced random questions off each other that we could find. I also use like online forums because they have like questions from previous years that people were asked. And there's also like a Facebook page, and they had a lot of help on there, but I didn't really just utilize the Facebook page. I reached out to a lot of my friends who were at those schools too to get like, I guess, advice on how to prepare for certain interviews because some are different. Like UOP's is very laid back, and I guess it's like more friendly. It's like more of a friendly environment. Like they want you to be comfortable. They don't want you to talk about your application. Usually they just want to get to know you, and they just try and have a conversation with you. Other schools like I don't know, just other schools are more formal. So like USC's is like situational based, and they do PBL, problem-based learning. So you work in a team, and that was an interesting interview. So hopefully, I'm hoping that next year people will be able to do in-person interviews because I think that's a thing that I missed out on at least. And I know previous classes have found like future roommates through the interview processes. So yeah, hopefully you get the in-person, but that's also just another cost to think of because you'll be flying to different places. Like I would have had to fly to New York and all those places. So kind of glad I saved money on that.
Thank you. And Shawnee?
So I probably interviewed for like half of the schools I applied to, and sometimes you'll get lucky, like for a couple of them, they kind of let us know what to expect. So they kind of gave us some of the questions that they said that they might ask, but they ended up asking them. And then from there, you can also just brainstorm the kind of subset of questions that would come from that. And, you know, other interviews were like completely vague. So I've had interviews that were like as long as like an hour, and then some were as short as like 10 minutes. So yeah, I think I would just like anticipate the kinds of things if they would ask you. Like Google's obviously like it's really helpful for something like that, and formulate your answers. And obviously do your practice, but don't recite. And I found that a lot of what I had originally practiced never came out of my mouth like at all. And you know, as the interview moves forward, like you're more lax and conversational. And I think like a good, you know, thing to tell yourself is if you do like get an interview and you move, you know, forward with that phase, like keep in mind that they're interviewing you because they already want you. So that's kind of like my best piece of advice for interviews.
Okay, thanks, Shawnee. And we'll go to Mandy next.
Yeah, so similar situation, I basically prepared my interviews just by kind of looking up common interview questions. And you'll see that most of the most common ones are things that you've probably already talked about in your application already. So I felt like for most of the common questions, I already had some sort of idea that I've written about before. For me, I actually just pulled up my Zoom camera and just practiced saying the answers out loud because saying it is different than writing about it. So I thought that was helpful. I had a couple different interview experiences. There was one school that it was kind of a disconnect interview, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but there was like video questions, and then you would record yourself answering the questions. And then that was kind of the interview process. And then after that, they had like a Q&A session with the faculty and students there. I think the majority of interviews are they kind of group that all together in like an interview day. That's how the interview was for the school I'm going to now. It was like a several hour thing. There was like a session where the faculty talked. There was an experience kind of like Kayla was saying, we had like a team-based learning experience where we got put into breakout rooms and we had questions to answer. I thought that was kind of fun, and you got to kind of see what the curriculum was like. But yeah, just overall, just try to be yourself, try to, you know, be concise with your answers, but also find ways for your personality to come out, because and just a way to express yourself that may not come out on paper when they're reading your application is important too. And just find ways to connect with the interviewee. Like near the end of my interview, I talked about how I was a swimmer, and we ended up talking about that for a while. So just finding other ways to connect with them could just help build personal relationships with them.
Thanks, Mandy. And we'll go to Jacqueline next.
Yeah, I had one interview, so it was not too bad. We had it was a group thing, so everyone came in and introduced themselves, and then you get put in a breakout room, so it's on Zoom with a professor, and then that's where you do like the actual interview part. So that made it less scary, I think. Definitely, I guess I didn't do too much to prepare, but I think in general, just knowing the general questions they could ask and they have asked in the past is helpful. So just looking those up and having an idea of what you're going to talk about. But I definitely find it helpful to not plan what you're going to say. It's so much more genuine to be able to just be a real person and just talk. Makes it less nerve-wracking too. So I just kind of planned okay, here's some key points, or knowing my answers and what I could talk about to bring it in. The other thing that's really helpful, knowing the school you're interviewing for, know things about their program specifically and have questions prepared. That's one thing. I had 3 questions and I definitely could have asked more. Things came up during it, so it's fine. You can just connect with whoever's interviewing you, but have a solid list of questions to ask. That's kind of how they keep it going a lot of the times.
Okay, thanks, Jacqueline. We'll go to Arisa next.
Yeah, I'd say the best thing I did to prepare was practice interview, get dressed up and get someone who is patient and can fake interview you. For me, it was my sister, and she had gone through a professional interview for dental school a couple years earlier, so she kind of knew what she was doing. And since our interviews were on Zoom, we just Zoomed, and the whole time we were in character, and I just she had come prepared with questions, and that was super helpful for me. And yeah, everyone else was saying, be yourself. They just want to know who you are. When the interview was big for me in trying to decide like which school that I wanted to go to, because that's kind of all you had was like this one Zoom experience to like base your entire like decision off of. So you also want to have questions for them. And like, don't just try to ask the question because you think it'll make you look good. Like, actually ask a question that you want to know the answer to.
And Megan?
So I think that the interviews were a lot more relaxing than I thought it was going to be. Like everyone's saying, it's like a conversation. I really recommend like knowing your application inside and out, just so you can easily talk about your experiences, and like in a natural way, I guess. And I also used SDN. So they have like for the different medical schools, people have posted like previous questions, interview questions. So what I would do is I would look up the school and answer those questions out loud rather than like writing them out, because then I could like, that'd be sort of like a rehearsed kind of thing. I just wanted to, how would I like answer this if they asked me it right now? So I would just speak out loud. And one thing I would recommend is if you get multiple interviews, immediately after the interview day, take notes about like how your experience was, because especially with this being like a virtual format, it all sort of became a blur. Like each school, it gets to be like really similar. Nothing stands out when you're looking back on it. So try to take notes after the interview and come prepared with questions, things like that. And I'm pretty sure they're probably going to do virtual interviews, at least for medical school again this year. I would think so. And what was helpful was a lot of schools had like students come and they did like a student panel, so you could ask questions that way. And you could ask them like about random stuff about like lifestyle in medical school or like that area. It doesn't have to be like necessarily exactly about like curriculum and stuff like that. You can ask them about anything. So I thought that was helpful.
Okay, I think that was everyone. So the next one is, did you have any challenges in your years as an undergrad, and how did you work to overcome them? And for this one, we'll start with Arisa.
I'd say my biggest challenge was that I had no idea what I wanted to do after undergrad. And so I just tried a bunch of different things, and I was nervous that once I finally decided on what to do, that my application would look super disjointed and like she has no idea what she wants. But really it helped me a lot because I had a really diverse set of experiences that I feel like gave me a really good perspective of like healthcare in general, but like for me to know exactly what it is that I want to do because I tried so many different things. So yeah, and I also had to take a lot of like classes after Cal Poly at community college because I didn't have the prerequisites, so that was a bummer. I would have obviously done them at Cal Poly had I known what I wanted to do. So being a student after undergrad was kind of funky transition time too, but we made it through.
Okay, thank you. And Shani?
So I had a lot of personal hardship in the years like before undergrad, and then, you know, that followed me throughout it. But honestly, I think that like engaging yourself in your studies or your extracurriculars or the friends that you make is probably the most worthwhile investment that you can make for yourself. Because like I was always seen as like the mediator, and a lot of it was just like personal family stuff, but it became less about what was going on at home and more about what I had going for me despite all those things. And I think once my outlook changed, I was more at ease with how my life was going. Yeah, so I mean, it was a challenge, and it still is a challenge now. And I think it's something that I anticipate being a challenge while I'm in grad school, but I think I can deal with it in a healthier way.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. And the next next panelist will be Mandy.
Yeah, so I was definitely one of those students that struggled academically, especially during my first year at Cal Poly. It took a lot of adjustment to find my study strategies. And so my advice would be, don't let you know, a bad quarter or a couple of quarters like deter you from applying to medical school. They definitely do look at the full picture. They look at upward trend. Yeah, that would be my advice. I was really nervous that was going to severely affect my application and my odds of getting into medical school, but it worked out. So.
Okay. Jacqueline?
So one thing that I struggled with that I feel like is actually pretty common for pre-health students in general is just like learning that you don't have to do everything. Like my sophomore year, I tried to like join a research team and I was working and then I tried to do all these things because I thought it was going to make me a better applicant, but really it was just kind of making me like mediocre at everything I was doing. So being able to like understand that it's okay to not do everything that you think is good and focusing on things that like I actually wanted to do was really helpful to learn, but it was kind of hard as well. And like, if I wanted to do some extracurriculars, like I have to be okay with the fact that like spending 15 hours a week means I'm probably not going to get A's in every single science class I take because I just don't have that much time to stay healthy and do all that. So that was kind of like a hard lesson, but I'm glad that I figured it out and didn't keep doing all these things that I thought were going to help me. Because like, even if something's like not a traditional like experience, it still makes you more unique. And it's actually something that you can use to your own advantage rather than being like the same applicant as like everyone else who's applying to.
Okay. Thanks, Jacqueline. And Megan?
I think everyone did a great job of explaining it. I totally feel all you guys. I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Kayla?
Yeah, I definitely align a lot with Jacqueline. I tried to do way too much my second year with like trying to do work and being on like several club positions and just taking like OChem and physics and bio like and other classes was pretty hard on me. So I didn't have like a great last or spring quarter of my second year. So I was super nervous. Like that's why I was a nervous applicant when I was first applying, is because of that quarter and like a subsequent quarter that I didn't do too well. But just like someone else said, like they really look at upward trends. Like they're not going to hold like a C or like something like that to your they're not going to hold it against you as long as they see like an upward trend and like you're like basically trying. Yeah, and another thing is like with trying to, I guess, like overextend myself my second year, I like kind of had a fall in my mental health. So going into, I like kind of had to reevaluate my life in a way where it was like a kind of a hard lesson where it's like I really like to help and like I tend to overextend myself, and I had to learn that like like I need to prioritize my mental health, especially going into like a health profession. I'm like, if that's like the type of mindset I want to kind of extend to my patients through my actions or whatever I may do, like I have to apply it to myself and take my own advice for once. So that's just something I learned.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. I think I got to everyone on that question too. So last question here. Thank you guys for hanging in there. I know it's a few minutes past 8, but so what words of advice would you offer to students wanting to enter your field? And looking back, is there anything that you would do differently? We'll start with Jacqueline for this one.
Okay, so I mean, optometry is kind of a small field, so I would definitely say like reach out to people. That was super helpful to me, was to be able to reach out to like anyone I knew that was currently in school or just currently practicing, just to kind of see what their aspect or their mindset is about everything. Just making sure you're making the right choice too, because you are committing to a career before actually like doing it really. So just getting those experiences and asking any questions, using the resources that are out there, kind of like the main things I would say. I don't think I would do anything differently because anything that I would change, I mean, I learned from it, so I'm okay with how it turned out. But just in general, like speak up and like don't be afraid to ask for help because it's out there.
Okay, and we'll go to Mandy.
Yeah, so I think words of advice, I currently work as a medical scribe, and I think that's been by far the most beneficial and influential experience I've had, especially if you're going into medicine. Just something about being in the doctor's office with them, seeing not only how they diagnose patients, but how they interact with patients, really kind of helped shape who I want to be as a future physician, and also just gave me like self-confidence going into the application and going into the MCAT. Just being able to see myself in that role really helped me a lot. And it's just a fun job. So if you're interested in that, I definitely look more into it. Is there anything you would do differently? I probably would have, knowing that COVID would hit, I would have started the application process and the essays and everything a little bit earlier. That was a little bit out of my control this year, but definitely as much time as you can spend working on your essays early, especially those secondaries, you can start working on those a lot earlier than you think, and it really does help de-stress that time when you have a bunch of secondaries to do. But yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mandy. And Megan?
I guess like some general advice is, I think like a lot of people going into like a health profession, we're always looking forward. Like, you know, we're always like planning this, like, this is when I'm going to apply. Like, I need to complete this to like get to this point. I would really like try to be more in the present and like enjoy what's happening now, like in undergrad or wherever you're at. And I think that's something that I would definitely do differently. Because like looking back, I'm like, wow, like I was so like worried about the future and like all this stuff. I should have been enjoying what was happening at that point. So yeah, I would definitely recommend just enjoying it. I guess it's tough now because you might not even be in SLO, but enjoying wherever you are, just the little things, and taking a break every once in a while.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Kayla next.
One piece of advice I guess I would give, it's kind of general, is like, don't just do things to put it on your application. Like, do things you actually enjoy, because then you'll feel more comfortable being able to do it in the long term, which is what like dental schools look for. They like to see that like consistency and like kind of a lot of time, not necessarily a lot of time, but just like a continued commitment. So like for me, I started shadowing my first year, and then I continued it up to my fourth year. So that like was a long time, I guess, in their eyes. And same with some of my other extracurriculars. I was like in 2 clubs for 4 years. So they just like that long-term thing. And those were things I enjoyed doing. So I didn't view the time commitment as like an added burden that I had to do. It was more like it was something I wanted to do type situation. Yeah, so like with Pacheco, volunteering at Pacheco, that was like technically my part of my community service hours, but I didn't really view it as that because I just really enjoyed, like, I worked with kindergartners and I really enjoyed my time doing that. And I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. And Arisa?
Yeah, I'd say it's okay to not apply like to go directly in after undergrad. Like, you can take some gap years and it's not a big deal. I was really just, I think, frustrated that I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. And I think it was like a pride thing because like when you're graduating, everyone's constantly asking you like, so what are you doing? What are you doing? You're like, I don't know. So it's okay if you don't know. And honestly, I think that like my time outside of school has prepared me the most for school, for grad school specifically, because like just the life skills that I've gained from not being a student, I feel has put me in a really good position compared to my classmates who have come straight from undergrad, for example. So it's okay to take your time to apply. Even if you do know what you want to do, you really want to be sure, because for health professions, like, you're doing a huge investment and it's going to pay off in the long run, but you want to make sure you choose something you like.
Thanks, Arisa. And Shawnee?
I mean, like, I guess, like, looking back, maybe I wish I would have explored nursing more thoroughly and probably just like a little bit sooner. And maybe even gotten like some more shadowing opportunities under my belt. And then like right now I'm in pharmacy, so sometimes, you know, there's some overlap, but it's, you know, at times like impersonal, and I feel like I wish I would have, you know, pursued something else, especially since I've been doing it for 4 years. But I guess like the beauty in discovering and what you want to do and like where you see yourself is like getting to experience the things that make sense of your aspirations and goals along the way, even if it's like in a really roundabout way. And I guess like my general piece of advice is just to do your research and keep an open mind.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I think that's all of our questions. So thank you again to the panelists for taking the time. And for those of you on the East Coast who really appreciate you staying up this late. Yeah, we'll take